Some people go to prison because they made a mistake. Some because they loved too much. Nia Johnson wasn't the kind to cause trouble. She wasn't reckless or wild. She was the quiet one, always holding everything together while the world around her crumbled. But sometimes, loyalty can make a fool of even the best of us. Her man Monty promised her a future they would build together once she was free. He whispered words that made her believe he was the one. He made her think they were unstoppable, that no amount of time or distance could break what they had. But 13 years in a cold, lonely cell changes things. And when Nia finally walked out those gates, she didn't walk into the life she expected. What do you do when you've sacrificed everything for love, only to return to a world where nothing is as it seemed? When you find out that loyalty wasn't enough, and the man you trusted has already moved on, leaving you in the shadows? This is the story of betrayal, of a love turned into a painful lie, and of a woman who will stop at nothing to reclaim what was stolen from her. Nia Johnson wasn't the type to seek trouble. Growing up in Charlotte's toughest neighborhoods, she learned early on that survival wasn't about being the loudest or the toughest. It was about being the one people could count on, the one who kept things steady when everything else was falling apart. She was the oldest of three, always helping her mama with the house, balancing food stamps and bills like a pro, while her baby sister, Chamra, played by different rules. But Nia? She stayed out of trouble. Not because she was scared, but because she knew what it meant to carry the weight of everyone else's world on her shoulders. She wasn't the girl who would ever get caught up in the game. She worked 2 shifts at the local clinic, put in hours no one else would, and kept her head down. The idea of a future was always just a bit out of reach, like a dream half remembered, always just beyond her grasp. Still she worked, she hoped, and she kept her faith, believing that one day her hard work would pay off. But then came Monty. DeMonte Ford, known on the block as Monty, was the type of man who caught your attention the moment he walked into a room. Tall, clean-cut, with a smile that made you forget the sirens going off in your head, Monty was a man who promised you everything but delivered nothing. They met one summer at a cookout. He was leaning against a car, laughing like life owed him something sweet. Nia didn't expect much, but there was something about him that made her trust him right away. He made her feel like she wasn't just a girl from the block. He made her feel like she was the only one who mattered. By 21 they were inseparable. They had their own little world, tucked away in a 1-bedroom apartment that was barely big enough for the 2 of them. It wasn't much, but to Nia it was perfect. Little did she know it wouldn't last. Monty had a way of making everything seem easy, even when it was far from it. On the surface he was the perfect man, charming, smooth, and always in control. He had a voice that could convince anyone to trust him, even when they knew they shouldn't. But underneath the charisma was a man who couldn't outrun his past. A man who had been in and out of juvenile detention since he was 15, trying to escape a life he couldn't shake. At first, Nia didn't see it. She saw the smooth talker, the man who promised her more than she'd ever had. He told her he was done with the streets, that he wanted to build something real, something just for them. Nia believed him. She wanted to believe him. And for a while, it felt like they were living in their own world, free from the chaos that surrounded them. But as time went on, things started to change. Monty's late nights grew longer. His phone calls were more secretive, the conversations always cut short. He'd come home with new sneakers, crisp bills in his back pocket, and stories about helping out a friend or flipping cars. Nia tried to ignore the growing unease in her chest, telling herself it was just the stress of everything. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Monty was hiding something. One night, everything came crashing down. It was just after midnight, and Nia was folding laundry in the quiet of their apartment when she heard the knock. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the police breaking down the door hit her like a punch to the gut. She barely had time to react before they were on her, throwing her to the floor face down. Monty wasn't much help. He was silent, already defeated. They found the drugs in their apartment. 2 bricks of cocaine hidden behind coats in the back closet. Cash stacked high under the bed. A scale and baggies on the table. It was all there, laid out in front of her. And Monty? He barely spoke, but when he did, his words were like daggers. This ain't what it looks like, Nia. But Nia knew. Nia sat in the courtroom, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just the charges that were crushing her, it was Monty's absence. He wasn't there for her in the way he promised. Not once had he shown up to court, not once had he written her a letter. The silence between them was suffocating, but she couldn't shake the hope that he was just waiting for her to get out. He swore he would be there when she walked out those gates just like he promised. But as the trial went on, it became clearer. Monty wasn't just absent physically, he was gone mentally too. The words the prosecutor spoke seemed to echo in her head. Possession, intent to distribute, conspiracy. Monty had let her take the fall for his actions. He had used her loyalty as a shield, throwing her into a fire he started, and now he was nowhere to be found. As Nia's sentence was handed down, 13 years, she held her head high. She wouldn't cry, not in front of them, not in front of anyone. But inside she was breaking. The man she loved had let her down, and there was nothing she could do about it. She could hear her mama's voice in her head, the words that used to comfort her. "You've got this, baby. Just keep pushing." But the world was different now. 13 years in prison would change anyone. And as time dragged on, Nia stopped waiting for Monty's letters, his promises. His words no longer meant anything. They were empty, just like the life they had built together. The letters from Chamra, her baby sister, still came, but they too started to feel different. At first, they were sweet, hopeful, but then there were gaps. Gaps in the letters that didn't make sense. And the tone, it wasn't the same. What had changed? Nia couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew something was off. It wasn't just Monty who had let her down. The years in prison had changed Nia, in ways she couldn't even explain. Her face was no longer the same, hardened by time and experience. She had become someone else, someone who could survive, no matter what life threw at her. Yet, the memory of Monty's promises never left her. They lingered in the back of her mind, like a whisper that refused to be silenced. By year 4, the letters from Monty had stopped completely. At first, she told herself it was the stress. Life on the outside was hard, money, family, the weight of it all. He was busy trying to build something. But as the months dragged on, Nia couldn't keep up the hope anymore. He wasn't coming back. And then came the day when everything changed. It was a regular morning like any other. Nia had just finished breakfast and was preparing for her shift in the library. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound, the clink of trays and forks as breakfast ended. Then a CO tapped her shoulder. He handed her a letter. No return address. No name. Just her name, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Nia opened it with the same practiced detachment she had developed over the years. It wasn't the first time she had gotten a letter without a return address. But when she pulled the photo out, her hand froze. Monty. In a tuxedo. Chamra. In white. A wedding photo. Her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to spin around her. She blinked once, twice, trying to process the image in her hand. But there it was, clear as day. Monty, the man she had given everything for, standing at the altar with her sister. Her baby sister, Chamra, the one she had raised, protected, and loved. It was a betrayal so deep, so gut-wrenching, that it felt like the ground beneath her feet had been ripped away. For years she had believed in Monty's words. She had held on to the hope that he would be there when she got out, that they would build the life they talked about, the life they had dreamed of. But here he was, moving on with Chamra. Nia couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. Her chest felt like it was being crushed under 1,000 pounds of weight. Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of it. This was the man who had promised her the world. And now he had married her sister. The one person she had always trusted. The one person who had known her heart. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a lie that had been unfolding behind her back, growing stronger with every passing day. Nia didn't cry. Not yet. But that night, when the lights went out and silence blanketed the room, she made a promise to herself. Monty had taken her future. Chamra had taken her family. But she wasn't going to let them take her peace. Not without a fight. The days in prison started to blur together. Nia's life was a routine. Wake up, work, eat, and sleep. She had stopped counting the days a long time ago, her sense of time distorted by the cold concrete walls that surrounded her. The Nia who had walked into prison, the young woman full of dreams and love for Monty, was no longer the woman she was now. She had hardened over the years, not out of choice but necessity. At first, she fought to hold on to the hope that Monty would keep his promise. But that hope had died a slow death, buried by the silence from the outside world. She had learned to live without it. To live without the constant anticipation of a letter, a visit, a sign that he still cared. She stopped waiting. Monty's betrayal wasn't something she could ignore. It wasn't something she could sweep under the rug like the dust that gathered in the corners of her cell. The pain of it was always there, lurking in the background, ready to rise up and consume her. But she refused to let it break her. She refused to let it be her downfall. As the years went by, something shifted in Nia. She began to see herself differently. She wasn't just a woman who had been wronged. She was someone who had survived. Survived the betrayal. Survived the isolation. Survived the heartbreak. She began to realize that prison hadn't just taken from her. It had given her something too. Strength. A strength she didn't know she had. Nia's mind sharpened in those years. She read anything she could get her hands on. Books, journals, old magazines. It wasn't just a way to pass the time, it was a way to reconnect with herself. To remind herself who she was before Monty, before the betrayal. The woman who could stand tall even in the face of adversity. She kept herself busy, but more importantly, she kept her thoughts in check. The Nia who had been blinded by love, who had believed Monty's lies, was gone. In her place was a woman who understood the cost of loyalty. A woman who had learned to survive on her own, without anyone to lean on. And as the years wore on, Nia realized that survival wasn't enough anymore. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to live. And for the first time in a long time, Nia felt the fire in her soul rekindle. It was time for her to take back what had been stolen from her. The moment Nia stepped out of the prison gates, the world outside felt different. It wasn't just the sunlight or the air, it was the emptiness. She had spent 13 years waiting for this moment, yet nothing about it felt like the victory she had imagined. There was no Monty waiting for her, no heartfelt embrace. No family to greet her, no friends cheering her on. The world had moved on without her, and she had no idea where to begin picking up the pieces. Her heart sank as the weight of her new reality pressed down on her chest. The truth was harsh and undeniable. Monty had moved on. He wasn't the man she had once believed in. He was just another man, one who had lied, betrayed, and left her to rot in a cell while he built a life with someone else. But it wasn't just Monty's betrayal that stung. It was the realization that she had wasted so much of herself on someone who never deserved her loyalty. That betrayal wasn't just Monty's doing, it was her own. She had allowed herself to be consumed by love, to lose sight of the person she used to be. She had given everything, expecting it to be enough, but it never was. The emptiness didn't just come from the lack of a reunion. It came from the realization that the life she had built with Monty, the future they had dreamed of together, had never existed. She had built castles in the air, but the foundation was made of lies. And now, as she stood on the edge of her new life, she had nothing to show for all those years. No love, no family, no future. For the first time in years, Nia allowed herself to feel the weight of the loss. It was as though the walls that had been built around her heart, the walls that had kept her going through the darkest days, finally came crumbling down. And in that moment, she realized something she hadn't been able to see before. Her survival, her resilience, it wasn't enough to heal the pain. But it was a start. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She wasn't just someone who had been wronged. She was a woman with nothing left to lose, and that, in itself, made her dangerous. Nia's first few days back in the world were quiet, almost too quiet. She stayed with Aunt Vi, who didn't ask many questions. She didn't need to. Nia wasn't ready to talk, wasn't ready to process everything that had happened. But she wasn't numb either. The fire inside her had been rekindled, and it burned with a slow, steady intensity. But the truth was, Nia hadn't come back to play the victim. She wasn't here for sympathy. She was here to make things right, not just for herself but for the person she had once been. The woman who had trusted Monty. The woman who had built her life around a lie. 2 weeks after arriving at Aunt Vi's, Nia made a call. She didn't explain it to anyone, didn't tell Aunt Vi. But she knew what she was doing, knew exactly what the consequences would be. The number she dialed wasn't one she had used in years. It was a burner, a number she knew would only be answered by someone who understood what she needed. "He's back," Nia said, her voice calm, controlled. She didn't mention Monty's name. She didn't need to. The person on the other end of the line understood exactly who she was talking about. She didn't give details. Just the street he was on now, the clean business front he ran, the life he was pretending to live. Monty had gone from hustling to settling down, but Nia knew better. She knew the streets never really let go. She knew that behind every clean front, there was always something dark waiting to come out. A month later, Monty was dead. Shot in front of his own tire shop, his life snuffed out before the day even had a chance to begin. The police would call it a robbery gone wrong, or maybe a business dispute that turned violent. But Nia knew better. She knew it was the end of a long, unfinished story. At the funeral, Chamra screamed. She cried as though her world was crumbling, as though Monty's death had taken everything from her. But Nia didn't cry. She sat in the back of the church, watching, waiting, feeling nothing but cold, quiet satisfaction. Her revenge wasn't messy. It wasn't loud. It was calculated. It was silent. And it was unforgettable. Nia's life, in the wake of Monty's death, was quieter than she ever expected it to be. The world kept moving. People continued to go to work, families celebrated birthdays, and time didn't stop. But Nia felt different. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into prison so many years ago, blind in her trust, full of naive hope. She wasn't the woman who had loved Monty with every ounce of her being, believing he would be there when she returned. Now she was someone who had seen the ugliness of the world, had seen how far loyalty could stretch before it snapped, and had learned to survive it. It was a painful transformation, but it was also freeing. She wasn't burdened by the weight of her past anymore. She had reclaimed her power, and in doing so, she had taken control of her future. Chamra tried to reach out to Nia, but Nia didn't answer her calls. She didn't need to hear the excuses, the apologies that wouldn't make a difference. Monty had stolen everything from her, and Chamra had taken the last of it. They were both gone from her life now, and Nia had no room for them anymore. She moved on, piece by piece. Nia got a job at a small cafe, not much but enough to support herself. She kept to herself, stayed out of trouble, and kept a low profile. But something had shifted within her. She wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had once burned so brightly was now a quiet ember, smoldering deep inside her, untouched by the world around her. And as time went on, Nia began to rebuild her life, slowly, quietly, but with purpose. She started taking small steps toward the life she had once dreamed of, one that didn't depend on anyone else's promises. She had learned the hardest lesson: trust no one but yourself. Nia never expected her freedom to come at such a cost. She thought walking out of prison would be the beginning of a new chapter. But instead, it was the final page of a story she had spent too many years writing with someone else's pen. Monty had promised her forever, but forever had never been hers to keep. Now Nia lives in the quiet corners of the world, where the past doesn't follow her, but the lessons do. She's no longer bound by anyone's lies or the weight of loyalty that had once crushed her spirit. She learned that sometimes, the only way to find peace is to let go of everything that isn't yours. The truth is, some debts don't get paid in court. Some people never apologize, never admit they were wrong. But Nia isn't waiting for any of that. She knows that revenge isn't always about taking something back. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you lost in the process. So ask yourself, if you were Nia, would you have stayed silent, or would you have let the world know exactly who you are now? The past doesn't define her. And now Nia is free.